Hi, I'm Kiefer Fuchs, and today we're going to be talking about a few Spanish reports of giants in the Americas as they arrived. Now, this is a common theme with the Spanish that they were encountering these giant humanoids as they were exploring the Americas. It's also important to note because this demonstrates that these humanoids were around at least until a couple hundred years ago, and on top of that, they're just extremely interesting. So today I'm going to be reading from Giants on Record. And first, I'm going to be talking about Giants along the Mississippi River, 1519. In 1519, a year before Ferdinand Magellan witnessed the Patagonian giants in southern Argentina, which we'll get to after this report, Spanish explorer Alonso Alvarez de Pendia was mapping the coastline of the Gulf Coast, marking various rivers, bays, landmarks, and potential ports, declaring that they belonged to the King of Spain. After navigating his way between Florida and Mexico, he sailed back along the Mississippi River. Pendia was the first Spanish explorer to sail up the Mississippi River and reported large settlements and villages inhabited by local giants. Not far from where the river empties into the Gulf of Mexico. He found a quote, found a large town on both sides of its bank. For a distance of 6 leagues up its course, some 40 native villages. Villages, not teepees. Keep that in mind. We're programmed to think of them as always nomadic, always living in teepees and things like that. But some 40 villages, large settlements. He quickly discovered that these giants were not dangerous, so Pendia and his crew settled among them to recuperate and carry out repairs to their 4 ships. Pendia detailed the abundance of gold found in the river and how the Indians wore plenty of gold engraved ornaments. Interesting. He also noted that other than giants, the tribes also had a race of tiny pygmies. Now that's another common theme that we find, particularly in North America. Tiny pygmies and extremely large humanoids. And when we're talking about these humanoids, we're not talking about giantism. We're talking about this elite class that are proportional, that have genetically different characteristics than your standard Homo sapiens sapien. Pendia describes the tribes that settled near the Mississippi River as, quote, a race of giants from 10 to 11 palms in height and a race of pygmy only 5 to 6 palms in height. Webster's dictionary defines a palm used as a unit of measurement to range from 7 to 10 inches. So the giants were at least 6'7" up to 8 feet tall. On his return from Tampico, Mexico, to the Mississippi, Pendia unwittingly sailed past a tribe of equally huge Texas giants. Matagorda Bay is located about 100 miles below modern-day Galveston. Historian Woodbury Lowry, along with several others, placed the giant Carnawakas nation along Matagorda Bay at the time. Furthermore, in a report of the Carnawakas, John R. Swanton of the Bureau of American Ethnology describes the men as being, quote, very tall and very well formed. Their hair was unusually coarse and worn so long by many of the men that it reached to the waist. Agriculture was not practiced by these Indians, their food supply being obtained from the waters, the chase, and wild plants. and, to a limited extent, human flesh, for, like most of the tribes of the Texas coast, they were cannibals. Head flattening and tattoo were practiced to a considerable extent. Now, I found that quote very interesting, particularly because they weren't agricultural, and then the head flattening or elongation of the head and tattooing. Um, this sounds very similar to the Scythian culture of the Eurasian steppe, and in a future video, I will demonstrate the comparisons between the two cultures and how possibly one culture moved over here and established this ruling class of these very large humans that eventually turned into the Native Americans and that culture that we learn about in school. However, it is also recorded that they, quote, do not eat men, but roast them only, on account of the cruelties first enacted against their ancestors by the Spanish. When Pindaya returned, he presented Francisco de Garay, the Spanish governor of Jamaica, with the first maps and sketches of the entire Gulf. These maps also included Pindaya's writings about the race of giants living there. So that's also important to note. He was handing this information off to his superior. He wasn't trying to deceive anybody or anything like that. So just understand that. These sketches and writings were archived by the famous Spanish chronicler Martin Fernandez de Negrete, and they can also be found in the archives in Spain. A few years later, in 1523, as the Spanish fleet discovered, dominated, and overran the Caribbean islands, a strange report came forth via historian Peter Martyr, who assisted at the Council of the Indies. The account was originally shared by a native who was Christianized and taken to Spain. Now, this is a very strange and interesting statement. Make of it what you will. The report ran that the natives were white and their king and queen giants, whose bones, while babies, had been softened with an ointment of strange herbs, then kneaded and stretched like wax by the masters of the art, leaving the poor objects of their magic half dead, until after repeated manipulations, they finally obtained their great size. So is this a native who's just trying to comprehend why these humans are so large? I find that far-fetched that that's actually what happened, but who knows? All right, moving on to the Patagonian giants. 1520. Now, this is a fairly well-known account, or accounts, I should say. During his busy schedule of sailing around the area now known as Patagonia, which I believe the name Patagonia derives from a large footprint or something like that, left by the inhabitants there. So it's even in the name. Ferdinand Magellan, much to his surprise, found a naked giant dancing and singing on the shore. Magellan sent one of his men to go on land to make contact and ordered him to dance and sing to the giant to show fellowship. The look on the chosen man's face was not recorded, but it must have been one of surprise and fear. The frolicking worked, and they were able to be alone with the giant. Antonio Pigafetta, who kept a diary of this journal, later turned it into a book called Magellan's Voyage, a narrative account of the first circumnavigation, wrote, quote, "When he was before us, he began to marvel and to be afraid. He raised one finger upward, believing that we came from heaven. He was so tall that the tallest of us only came up to his waist." I actually have that diary right here, and I wanted to read a little bit more of that because it's so interesting, and also take into consideration with this, these these accounts were taken at face value with everything else except when it came to, giant humans. Then it's, automatically a fabrication because there's an academic cover up. He was so tall that they did not even reach to his waist. He was well proportioned, having a large face encircled with yellow paint. Well proportioned, keep that in mind. And his eyes, also around his eyes, and two hearts painted on his two cheeks. His hair dyed white, and clothed in animal skins skillfully sewn together. Skillfully sewn together. That's another thing to take into consideration. This animal had the head and ears that are as large as a mule, and a neck and body resembling that of a camel, and tail like a horse, and many were seen on that land. Now, things like that, what he was describing was a guanco, which is a relative of a llama. So he's just trying to describe something that he had not seen before, similar to these giant humanoids. The feet of the giant were wrapped in the said skin like shoes, which is common in what we see in archaeological sites in North America. And he had a short, stout bow in his hand. The thick string was made from the gut of the said animal, and a bundle of very large cane arrows, feathered like ours. For the pointed steel, they have a sharpened stone out of which fire comes, i.e., flint. The captain commanded that he be given drink and food and other things. He showed him a large steel mirror, and when he saw his face, he was greatly frightened and jumped back and knocked over 3 or 4 of our men to the ground. Afterwards, the captain gave him some bells, mirror, comb, and some rosaries. They spent time on the island hunting with the huge natives, building a storehouse for their supplies, and devising a cunning plot to kidnap 2 of them to take them back to Europe. The first part of the treacherous plan worked, and they managed to get them on the ship, but they both died before Magellan could show off his prized possessions. While he didn't keep the bones to prove his claim, why he didn't keep the bones to prove his claim is unknown, but the decaying bodies and terrible smells must have been a good enough reason. In 1580, Spanish captain Pedro Sarmiento was said to have seen the giants in the same area, according to a historian on his voyage. Another narrator, Anthony Knevet, who accompanied the circumnavigator Thomas Cavendish in 1592, wrote of 2 Patagonians 12 feet tall, and a boy's height was over 9 feet. Wilhelm Schouten and Jacob Le Marie, 2 Dutch navigators, touched down in Patagonia in 1615 and found some graves made of heaped stone, one of which they opened and saw within it, quote, the bones of human beings 10 and 11 feet in stature. According to Robert Silberberg, there were other reports similar to this. John Wood, of John Narborough's 1617 expedition, made no reference to their great statue, only that none were above 6 feet, so you have contradicting reports here. However, another eyewitness account suggests otherwise. Harrington and Carman returned there in 1704, and with reports that corroborated the Spanish version. Horace Walpole, an English historian and Gothic novelist, published an account of the giants lately discovered in a letter to a friend in the country, following his return in 1766 of Captain John Byron, who had circumnavigated the world in the HMS Dolphin. Word leaked that his crew had seen 9-foot-tall giants in South America. Then, in 1741, survivors of a shipwreck, John Cummings and John Bulkley, made note that they were, quote, of middle stature. Whoever they were, some of them were very tall, as they wrote the following, quote, I was never more astonished than to see such people. The stoutest of our grenadiers would only appear nothing to them. Nothing in nature could appear more terribly frightful than these people did, both men and women. Their horses also appeared small in comparison to their riders, though when I was near them I observed that their horses were of common size. And our people on board, who were looking through their glasses, said, we look like mere dwarfs to the people we were amongst. These people, who in size come to the nearest giants of any people I believe in the world.